Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 240 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, where I'm in town to deliver 15 situational awareness programs for oil refinery operators at Syncrude, Canada, and 2 programs for first responders throughout the region. Today's feature segment is a continuation of a series of flashback episodes I'm running from the early days of the SA Matters show. When I first launched this show back in May of 2014, I had some amazing guests who shared some incredible near-miss stories. The problem is the show was new, really new, and I had not yet gained much of a followership. Well, at least not like the followership we have today. So I wanted to give the listeners and the viewers who were not with us back then an opportunity to learn from some of those powerful stories. Now, for those who are watching the episode on our SA Matters TV YouTube channel, this interview coming up is audio only segment because we weren't recording video interviews of our guests back then. Everything on the episode leading up to and following the interview will be video. Before I jump into the feature segment though, I want to take a moment to make another mention of a special offer that I'm making on enrollment in the SA Matters Online Academy. Most first responders have received little or no training on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making. This might be funny if it weren't so tragic. Did you know that issues related to situational awareness and flawed decision-making are leading contributing factors in near-miss and casualty reports? And many times the issues that led to the casualty might have been avoided if only the responder or responders had developed and maintained strong situational awareness. I am on a quest to fix this problem. I really want to help improve your safety and your decision making. And I really want you to go home after every call to the ones who love you. And I'm pretty sure that you share that goal too. So let me help you. I've put together an incredible offer for fire departments. Until November 30, a department can enroll up to 100 members for a flat fee of $2,999. Let me give you some perspective on how good a deal this is. The regular tuition for the Academy is $199 a person. Even if your department enrolls less than 100 members, it's still a great bargain. To learn more, just visit the SAMatters.com website and click on that green box on the right side of the homepage labeled Online Academy. If you want to enroll or maybe you just have some questions, just send me an email at support@richgassaway.com. Or you can give me a call at 612-548-4424. As a friendly reminder, this special offer does expire November 30. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, a flashback to my interview with Lieutenant Jason Corthell discussing a structural collapse that buried him under tons of steel and concrete.
The day was March 27th. It was approximately 5:50 in the evening. We were just getting done with our 12-hour shift. We usually start at 6 in the morning, go until 6 p.m. And there's anywhere from 12 plus on duty a day on the day crew for this department.
Jason, how many of those are full-time career, and how many are part-time that are working shifts?
We're actually a combination department. We have no full-time firefighters. It's staffed by volunteers at night and on the weekends mainly, and then during the day it's mainly off-duty career firefighters that are working their side job. Okay,
so everybody on duty there is working for Cypress Creek part-time, and they're career firefighters somewhere else.
Correct, and the majority of the career firefighters in this department are Houston firefighters.
Okay, all right, so go ahead and continue on.
So, it was about 10 minutes before we got off shift, and we had a pretty slow day. Did our normal station duties, cleaned the station, wiped down the trucks, went to work out, just a run-of-the-mill day. I had plans to meet up with some guys that I was on duty with to go play basketball right around 6:30, 7 o'clock that night. And we were actually discussing it when the tones dropped to assist a neighboring department with a apartment fire. So we loaded up on the truck, and, probably 75% of the time when you're dispatched to a mutual aid fire, you tend to get either, stuck in staging or turned around completely and disregarded. Mm-hmm. Well, we turned the corner, and I saw the smokestack from the front right seat. I was riding lieutenant that day, and so I knew we had one. So I let the guys in the back know that we had a working fire, and switched over to our neighboring department's radio, and we started heading that way.
Which department was having the fire?
Cypher.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
And so we pulled up on scene. We were probably fourth or fifth apparatus on scene, and as we were walking up, they were already dropping the second alarm. We have automatic aid, so we were on the first alarm, and then they were dropping the second as we were walking up. As we were walking up, I started asking for our assignment and where command wanted us, and he was overloaded with radio traffic at that point and didn't respond right away. And so we waited in staging for a little bit. And eventually one of the other guys on my crew, who's also a captain with the city of Houston, said that he knew command because he worked with him in the city. So we all walked over there, and he kind of knocked on the window of the command vehicle and said, hey, we're Engine 24, and we're here to do work. Just tell us where to go. And at that time, we got assigned to the Charlie side of the structure, the rear of the structure, and our assignment was to meet up with Engine 6 and help with fire attack in the third floor / attic, and make headway. At the time when we arrived and we started walking up to the building, I could see smoke coming out of the ridgeway, and I knew it had gotten up in the attic, but it didn't look like anything too substantial that we, couldn't handle with the crews that were on scene already.
Jason, describe this building.
It was a 3-story apartment complex, and it was kind of interesting how it was built because the main body of the complex, the center of the complex or building, was 3 stories. And then on the exterior of the building, the main building, they had a 2-story apartment. So there was basically 2 different levels of roofs. So there was a 2-story part, and then in the middle there was a 3-story part, and then on the other side there was a 2-story part. So it just kind of built up in the middle a little bit and had a 3rd story. It wasn't, any substantially different than any other apartment, down here as far as size or anything like that. It was about the normal size of an apartment building and pretty much normal layout. The roof structures were interesting just because, you had a 2-story roof butted right up against a 3rd-story roof. So basically, if I got on top of the 2nd-story roof, I could look at the 3rd-story siding. And that's actually what we were planning on doing, was getting up on the 2nd-story roof cutting a hole in the side of the building because it would have given us access to the attic in the 3rd floor, and we would have been able to hit it from the what would be my right side on the rear of the building. And we already had crews working, I guess, on the left side if you're facing the Charlie side of the building. So we were basically going to pinch it off in the middle. So we got our assignment, and
what's your crew size?
Right now my crew size is 3. My driver stayed with the truck.
Okay.
Just usually on mutual aid calls, he'll stay with the truck and help out where he needs to.
Okay.
And then it was 3, and then we had, interestingly enough, my best friend, the one that I, basically grew up in the fire service with and had planned to play basketball with, showed up, and he was riding district chief on the volunteer side for Cy Creek. And he showed up, and he had his gear on and everything, and he walked up to me, and he said, "Hey," he said, "Command didn't have an assignment for me right away, so I'm just going to go with your crew." And I said, "All right, let's go." And so then my crew size was up to 4 now. And our assignment was to stretch an apartment lay, a 3-inch line, from the first arriving pumper, and then take the 1 3/4 off of that, and like I said, go up and meet engine 6 on the rear of the building, the Charlie side. And so my buddy, the district chief, his name is Sanchez. He pulled the cross lay that they didn't have a pre-connected apartment lay, so he pulled the cross lay, and then the driver from engine 6 from Cypress grabbed the 3-inch supply line off of the truck and started taking it to the rear. So we got to the back. Like I said, our original plan was to ladder the 2nd-story roof and make access to the 3rd-story attic by way of cutting a hole in the middle of the building in the siding, that way to basically shoot a stream through there. Mm-hmm. So I sent one of my guys and a Cypher guy that wasn't doing anything at the time to go get a ladder and meet me back on the Charlie side. While I was doing that, my other crew member, the captain that works for the city of Houston, and my buddy Gil, the district chief, they both grabbed the line and started working their way up the stairs. So I was down on the ground still kind of monitoring my 2 guys that were on the stairwell and also waiting my crew member to come back with the Cypher member with the ladder. So as soon as I saw Brian come around the corner, he's the one that grabbed the ladder. I knew he had the ladder, and we also had a district chief behind us that was assigned to Charlie sector. He was the Charlie sector chief. So I looked up at Gil, and Gil was on the 2nd-story landing, and as I looked at him, he kind of motioned for me to come up to help him, pull some hose. And so I walked up the stairs, and I started pulling hose, for our nozzleman. And our nozzleman started making his way up to the 3rd floor. And that's really the last I saw of him. I got up to the 2nd-story landing, and me and Gil were facing each other at the time. And Gil had just told me, he's like, I'm about to go up to the 3rd floor to help Captain Polite with fire attack. And I said, that's fine. I said, I'm going to stay down here and I'll just keep feeding you hose. Well, no sooner than I said that, it was kind of eerie. We just looked at each other for apparent no reason. And I felt something hit me in the shoulder, just barely nick me. And it felt like it was, a piece of sheetrock or piece of wood or something that I could withstand. And then I looked at Gil, and I saw something hit him hard enough to almost throw him into me, and it kind of knocked the front shield of his helmet down and knocked him forward. As he was kind of stumbling forward into me, my initial reaction was to kind of grab him, and I would think at that point what I would want to do is just go back down the stairs with him, because we were only 1 flight up. And before I could do that, we had the steel and concrete exterior stairwell of the apartment come down on top of both of us. And at first, I just kind of moved and kind of went with the motion, and I thought maybe I can dodge it, or maybe I can, still stand up and withstand the punishment, that's going on. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4". I'm 250 pounds. So, I mean, I can hold my own, when it comes to kind of being a brute or pushing stuff around. And Gil's also a really big guy too. So for us two to experience this, it was something definitely new and something that we never thought we'd get caught in. So before you knew it, everything was on top of us. I had I remember 3 limbs being pinned down, and my radio got ripped out, and all I had was my left arm to move, and everything else was pinned underneath the stairs and the landing and whatnot, whatever came down on top of us. And Gil ended up being maybe 2 feet in front of me, and he basically got squashed like a pancake. His head was in between his knees, and the top of his air bottle and the back of his helmet were holding up the landing that came down. So I don't know how much one of those weighs, but it's a big concrete slab held in by angle iron, and that came down. And so basically he was holding up the entire collapse. And I didn't hear anything from him for about 15 seconds. I would estimate, in that time, things go fast and things go slower than what you think. But for me, it was probably about 15 seconds. I didn't hear anything from him. And at that point, I thought I had just lost my friend. I thought I had just witnessed his death for the most part. And he didn't say anything. And I didn't really say anything either. I kind of laid there. I don't know if I was kind of in a form of shock or what the deal was. And then I heard Gil start screaming that his legs were on fire. And when the collapse happened, we still had, active fire everywhere. And I'm not sure if he got embers underneath his legs or fire underneath his legs, but his legs were burning underneath him. And like I said, I had my left arm it wasn't pinned. So the least I could do is at least take my left arm and start sweeping underneath his legs. So while I'm sweeping underneath his legs, I thought at the very least, at least he knows that I'm there with him and he's not alone. I don't know how much good I'm doing. And then I heard him get on his radio and start trying to call out a mayday. And that's when it kind of really sank in and got real to me that we might not be making it out of this thing, And he got on the radio, tried to call his mayday. He got trumped by the sector chief by his mayday. I remember hearing we've had a full structure collapse, and I remember hearing all the resources that he kept calling out. All the tools needed, the crews that are needed. He said, everyone come to the back. We've had a collapse. We need this tool, this tool, this tool. I can't remember all the tools he named. But then it really sank in that we were stuck pretty bad. Like I said, being a bigger guy, your first reaction is just to kind of push up off of everything and just kind of push everything off of you and wiggle your way out. And I've never had that feeling where I've been pinned down to the ground. Probably since I was little, my dad, would pin me to the ground and tickle me or wrestle me or something like that. I mean, that's really what I liken it to, is you just really have a sense of helplessness and you can't do anything and you're just at the mercy of some inanimate object. And when that sank in, that was the hardest part for me was, this is how everything's going to end, and
I would think initially you were struggling pretty hard, but at some point did you just realize you weren't going to beat this and you just needed to lay there?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I literally said a prayer, and I know Gil was saying it's all in God's hands now, and
he said that out loud?
Oh yeah, multiple times. and I was praying mainly for just, I said, God, make it quick, multiple times. And
what do you mean by that?
What's that?
What do you mean by that?
I just didn't want to suffer if there was going to be more collapse, because I didn't know what was on top of me. I just knew it was really heavy and I couldn't move it. So I didn't know if it was a staircase and that's it, or I didn't know if it was a staircase and then everything else came down on top of us, like the whole building. I didn't know. I just knew it was something that was really heavy. And so I started thinking worst case, especially when I heard the mayday go out and heard all the resources that were being called for. I just thought the worst, and I thought I was going to die. It definitely crossed my mind. And seeing Gil, take on that landing the way he did, and knowing that he was dead, or knowing that he almost died as well. That to me was pretty much the end of it for both of us. And that's just how I felt at the time. But you hit the nail on the head. You kind of struggle at first, and you're scared, and you're pissed off, and you have all kinds of emotions. And then for me, I just kind of came with it, and I was like, I just clicked in on air right before this happened, so I knew I had a good air supply. So I just thought, okay, I need to start conserving air, because there were still fire conditions. It was still really smoky. It was still really there was still some heat coming off of things. My gear was burned, and there was still, some bad stuff going on around us. And, like I said, all I could do at that time was take my left arm, my free appendage, and start sweeping underneath Gil's leg to try and get some of the embers off from underneath his leg while he's screaming.
Let me ask you a question. In a number of interviews that I've done, the folks that are in the bad spot that you're in, many of them have said to me that in the moment of the spot that they're in, that somehow they felt a sense of calm, almost coming to the realization that this is how it's going to end for me, and their anxiety just kind of waned away, and they just felt like there was a peace in their mind that this was going to be the end for them. Did anything like that happen for you?
Yes, most definitely. I think when I started praying, it wasn't a frantic thing in my head. It wasn't a frantic thing. I wasn't like, screaming, please God, make it quick or anything like that. I was 100% ready to go, and I thought this is how everything's going to end. I didn't know what else was going to collapse. I didn't know how bad the collapse was or anything, and I had to come to peace with it. In my mind, I started getting really calm. And it felt like it was chaos, and then it got really quiet. And it was like, everyone kind of, it felt like everyone just kind of said, oh my God, did that just really happen? Like that's just how the aura felt around me. And, I was ready to go. I was calm. I was calm about it. You panic, and then you realize that you're not going to beat it. It's however much steel and concrete on top of you.
Yeah.
And so then you get calm.
Did you think about your family at all?
Yeah. I thought about my family, thought about, everybody, thought about my friends, my department. I thought about everybody. And to be honest with you, that the first thing and the prominent thing that really got me was my friend's family, because I've known him since early 2005, and I was basically there when him and his wife went to the hospital to have their first kid, and they have 3 now. I've been to family Christmases with them. I'm real close with him and his family. And it's just crazy to me how on that day, he just showed up randomly to the scene and said, Jay, I'm on your crew with you. Let's go. And earlier in that day, we reached out to each other and we were going to play basketball together. And we haven't played basketball together in probably over a year. And it was just, and then even more strange, earlier that day, my ex-wife found an old picture of me and him together on her phone, and she sent me a picture of him and I together.
That day.
That exact day. And I didn't prompt it. It was just, she said, hey, I found a picture of you and Gil, back in 2005, at a wedding or something. And she sent it to me, and I have it on my phone. And it says received March 27th on my phone.
Wow.
And
okay, so you're trapped under the concrete, and you're sweeping your hand underneath him to try to keep his legs from getting burnt. Take it from there.
Right. And then our nozzleman, who was on the third story, he basically rode the collapse down. And he ended up being on top of the rubble just to me and Gil's right as we were laying there. And he heard Gil saying that his legs were on fire, so he turned the nozzle onto us and started spraying us through the wreckage or the rubble or whatnot.
He's not trapped?
He's not trapped. He's on top of the collapse because he rode it down.
Okay.
And then Gil, screamed at him to cut off the water. He's drowning us. So he cut it off, and we were there for, I don't know, we were there for a while, and Gil kept trying to move. He kept trying to unwedge himself, but like I said earlier, he was what was holding up the collapse. And so, do you tell one of your best friends to just stay there and wait and just keep having this weight on your neck and your back? Because if you don't, you're going to cause a bigger collapse and kill both of us still. Or you tell him to keep coming and just, not, I don't know. It was a tough situation. I wanted to tell him to quit moving, and then I wanted him out just as bad as I did, So we didn't have really any prominent communication between us that was like, hey, I'm going to do this, you do this. And nah, it was all pretty frantic. Once he started moving, stuff started coming down more and more, and I was screaming for him and all kinds of stuff. I remember hearing his mask, the seal on his mask came off too. And I remember hearing his air coming out from his face piece, and he couldn't get to hold his face piece on. And I remember as he was inching a little bit closer to me, I kept trying to reach up and push his face piece up. And at that time, I felt a little bit of weight start coming off of me. And so I knew that there were crews working right above me to get all the metal and concrete off. And about that time, I felt someone's hand on my rear shoulder straps of my SCBA. And I felt like someone was trying to kind of pull me up, but they couldn't get me yet because I was still caught in some stuff. And so I was screaming at them, I'm still hung up. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to hold on to Gil, trying to grab him too and take him with me. And I remember someone said, you have to let go of him. We have to get you first. And that was probably the hardest thing I had to do that day, was just let go completely, because I was trying to pull him out with me. And as I stood up, Gil came out from under the landing completely, and that caused somewhat of a secondary, I would call a secondary collapse. And that's when I got a big metal I-beam that came down and took out my knee. That's how I received my knee injury. I sprained my LCL and MCL. I tore my ACL, and I had meniscus damage, all from the secondary collapse. If the first one wasn't bad enough, it was the second one that got me. And once that happened, my feelings were I was basically done with this building, done with this whole scene. I just want to get away from it. You know, it's hurting me, it's hurting my friend, and, you know, I'm through with it. And so I was probably about 4 or 5 stairs up on the stairs, and I just threw myself down kind of backwards the rest of the way. I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. So I tumbled down the stairs, and I landed face down. I knew they had Gil because I saw four or five other guys working with him, and I knew they had him. So I felt comfortable leaving the stairwell, and I threw myself down the stairs, and I landed on my stomach, and I remember trying to get up to my hands and knees to crawl away from the building. And as I got on my hands and knees, that's when, you know, my knee injury really became prominent, and I couldn't crawl, and so I just laid there. And I had one of my buddies from Pearland was actually working for Cypress that day as well, and he came over and grabbed me and dragged me over to the fence, kind of took all my stuff off of me, and you know, was telling me it's okay, you know, you're out now, you're good. And I looked over to find Gil, and Gil was probably about 15 feet away from me, and he was screaming at everyone to get away from him and whatnot. So I knew he was back in true form, you know. And so, you know, I remember sitting up against the fence of the complex and looking back up at this building that had just, you know, the stairwells just collapsed on us. And I remember looking up at the building and just feeling an overwhelming sense of this building is going to come down on me. You know, something just fell on me that was extremely heavy, that had me trapped. I felt like the whole building was going to come down on me. And interestingly enough, Gil, I found out later, felt the exact same way. So they had guys come around the back and take us away. They put me in one ambulance and Gil in the other ambulance. Well, one ambulance was blocked in, the ambulance that I was in. They were committed to the scene. So they had to actually wheel me back out of that ambulance and put me in a different ambulance. Well, the different ambulance was Gil's ambulance. So me and Gil, we rode to the hospital together. Understandably, he was definitely shaken up and whatnot, and had some good meds in the back of the ambulance. They got both of us to the hospital. We shared a hospital room, and we were both released later that night. I had a nice knee brace on, and he had some bumps and bruises and some mental lapses and issues that he's dealt with. So
was his legs burned?
He had what looked like small, like cigarette burns on the back of his legs, I guess you could say. Nothing too substantial, but he said he really felt it when, you know, he went to like go take a shower that night, and the water hit it. He said he felt the sting pretty good. So he didn't have any burns that needed any kind of treatment or anything like that. But I definitely could see how, you know, he landed on some embers or fire.
What? That's an amazing story. What's your takeaways? What lessons would a listener benefit from hearing from somebody who's been where you have been?
You know, my biggest thing, I have the opportunity to be an instructor, and I get to help cadets and teach cadet classes. On the volunteer side, I've helped out with the paid side as well, but I always tell the cadets, you know, I don't care what department you're part of. I don't care how big or small your department is. If you're a volunteer, paid, part-time, on-call, whatever, it can happen to you. And I used to preach that. I used to preach it, and did I necessarily believe it was going to happen to me at Cypress Creek? Not really, because it was my side job. Side job fires aren't like career fires. You know, that's kind of the mindset that people get in sometimes. It's unfortunate, and it's wrong, and that's how I felt at times. You know, did I go in there and John Wayne something? No, but I felt like it would never happen at Side Creek. That's what I felt like. I felt like it was my part-time job. I can kind of, take a little bit easier, and go about my day. It can happen to you. I mean, it can happen to you anywhere, anytime. You can be doing anything. We were, like I tell people all the time, I say, I had my gear on properly, everything strapped up, everything tight, just like I teach, the cadets that I talk to. I had a hose line that I was on. I had a tool in my hand. I had everything I needed to be successful in this fire. And I was in an exterior stairwell of an apartment, usually my safe haven, where I bail out to if something goes wrong inside an apartment. I was in a safe haven, and the safe haven is what come down on top of me and almost took me and my friend's life. Mm-hmm. So everything in the world can be done right, and something can still go wrong.
As you look back now, and we have to be a word of caution as to doing this, because as we look back, our hindsight is always better than our foresight. But as you look back now and think of that day, do you think that you were able to see, whether you really understood it at that moment or not is another issue, but were you able to see that the fire involvement was significant enough that the structural integrity was probably in question before the collapse? I mean, as you were making your way up, or from the ground level looking up, or making your way up the stairwell looking up, were you able to see that there was the potential of a collapse before it happened, or was it from the fire, or was it structural deficiency in construction or something? I don't want to assume that the fire caused the collapse, but kind of talk me through that.
Right. Without, getting into legalities or anything like that, there were definitely noted structural deficiencies within the complex that my fire chiefs made aware to the management, and it actually prompted both of my departments, Side Creek and Pearland, which are approximately 50 miles away from each other. Both of those departments have gone around to every apartment complex in their jurisdictions and checked structural integrity of stairwells. This particular stairwell had steel, I guess some type of steel beam or I-beam or what have you, supported by a block of wood that came out of the actual, apartment, or came out of the actual structure. An interesting design. I personally, I don't feel that it was sufficient enough to hold the weight up of those stairs. And I know that there was some rust issues and there was some rotting issues with the wood on all the other stairwells in the complex that we noted after the fire. Of course, we couldn't necessarily study the staircase that fell down on top of us because, it was pretty much garbage at that point. But as far as the fire attack and the fire conditions and everything else, to me, when I walked up there, that was a bread and butter apartment fire that got up in the attic. It was a common attic with no fire stops, no firewalls, no nothing. And there's helmet video, from one of the guys from Cypress, and they put a hurt on that fire. And we were going to go up there and we were going to mop up and we're going to put the fire out. I mean, it was just bread and butter, just simple fire. Lots of resources, but it was going to go well. That's how I felt. I didn't feel like anything in those stairs could have hurt us. When I made that decision, there was no maybe we shouldn't be here. There was none of that feeling. There was nothing. So command did a great job. Everybody on scene did a great job. No decision that I made or command made, I feel, should have been any different.
Mm-hmm. Was the fire impinging on the stairwells? as you guys were on the second floor and your nozzleman was up on the third floor, was there active fire out in the stair area?
No, the stairwell construction was all steel and concrete, so there was no fire anywhere on the actual stairs. There was fire in the apartments on the left and right side of us, but it wasn't like blowing out, into the stairwell or anything like that. It was all pretty much up in the attic for the most part.
So it was the fire inside the apartments that weakened the integrity of the stairs.
I can't really say.
But there was no fire out on the stairs, right?
Correct.
So it wasn't like you guys were ascending stairs on fire and then the stairs fell down on you and somebody could say, well, you shouldn't climb up stairs that are on fire. There was nothing out there to be on fire, right? They were all still on concrete.
Exactly right. And
wow.
Yeah, that's I don't know. The apartment of origin was the second story apartment, the apartment on the second level. And I believe it got up into the wall and went straight up into the attic and, in a sense, bypassed the third story. And then eventually it came back down and got the third story. But to me, the way it looked and afterwards and right before the collapse, I remember seeing a little bit. The way it looked was the second story apartment balcony was burned pretty good. And then the attic was burning pretty good, and it almost spared the third story in between the apartment of origin and the attic. It almost spared that third story apartment, and so that was interesting to me that maybe it got up in the wall and there was no vertical stop to it either. Kind of something maybe like balloon frame construction or something. I don't know, but it just looked interesting to me. But as far as fire impingement on the stairs, there was absolutely none.
Okay, so you go back to this building again for another fire next week. Similar circumstances. What's your vigilance tell you about ascending stairs? I mean, would you, in light of what you know now, would you still ascend those stairs knowing the potential of collapse, or would you deploy another technique? With the benefit of what you've learned from this incident?
I mean, with our pre-planning, we're aggressive. This has been a lesson for both departments that I've been part of. Unfortunately, I had to, undergo injury and surgery and everything else for it to be brought to light, but if it's going to save another one of my guys or save any firefighter's life, for that matter, I'd do it over again. As far as my personal actions, I still feel like I would do the same thing. I mean, I'd be a little more cautious of the stairwell integrity as I'm walking up to it. I'd maybe visualize the base, visualize what I'm looking at. I mean, right now I live in an apartment and I live on the first floor. And so I have to walk underneath a steel and concrete staircase every day I leave my apartment. And every day I leave my apartment, I look at the construction on this staircase and I see how sturdy and how well made it is. And then I look at the apartment staircase, the one that collapsed on me, and it's a completely different ballgame. So to answer your question in short, I would do the same exact thing that I would normally do. I would just be a little more vigilant of, what's actually holding this staircase up over my head.
So would you take time before you ascended stairs to take a look at it perhaps from the underside and assess the construction before you made your ascent? Because that's not something that I think many of us would typically do. If there was no fire impingement on the stairs, I don't know that we would take time to do that. Is that something you would do now or recommend that others do?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. Like I said, I do it now. And, I'm not anywhere near going back to firefighting duties yet. And I do it now in my own apartments every day when I leave. I look at the bolts that hold down the staircase just out of habit now, and I would urge everybody, anybody who listens to this, it takes maybe 5 seconds at the most to look at all the bases of the staircases, in a stairwell. Look what's hanging above your head. You have the benefit and the opportunity, I would say, a good majority of the time, to look what's being held over your head. Whereas if you're in a house fire or some kind of structure fire and there's water heaters and HVAC systems above your head and you have sheetrock above your head, you can't see that. And it'd be amazing if we had some kind of tool that we could see the layout of how stuff is above our heads when we go into any structure, any house fire, anything like that. But we don't have that tool. So utilize what we do have and look around, when you're in a stairwell and see what's hanging up above your head and what's supporting it.
If you would have arrived on that fire and say you would have just taken a moment to look at the stairwell construction before you made the ascent, do you think it would have stopped you from going up the stairwell? I mean, was it even on your radar that it would even potentially collapse? Even if you looked up and said, well, that doesn't look like it's really built all that sturdy, you probably still would have went up, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it just as I was going up the stairs, I didn't notice anything. It didn't bounce, it didn't twist, it didn't turn. Mm-hmm. Just a normal concrete steel construction apartment stairwell, and that's
warning that it was going to collapse.
No, like I said, when you're in those situations, things happen slower than reality and things happen faster than reality. And it went real fast. It was real quick. Just light to dark in about a second. So it put me on my stomach, and I was at its mercy from that point on.
Wow. Well, Jason, thank you for sharing this story. It's powerful. It's just so, as you were saying it, I could just imagine how many times I ascended stairs without any thought whatsoever. As you said, you really hit me when you said, the stairs would be the safe haven place that I would bail out of an apartment, onto that exterior stair position, saying, this is my safe place. I'm out of the fire, and this is where I would be, where I would bail out to. And you're in the safe spot, seemingly, thoughtfully, and that's where you got caught.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Thank you so much for giving me the gift of your time and the listeners the gift of your time to share this. It's just it's an incredible story, and I'm so glad we got connected.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason, for participating in this interview and sharing your lessons learned with our listeners and our viewers. Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and more than 67,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, school bus drivers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, then we're here to help improve your safety and your survival, and to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love you.
Welcome to Chief Miller. Chief Miller operates the largest social media page dedicated to the men and women of the fire service from around the world. Check him out on Instagram at Chief_Miller. Find him on Twitter at Chief_Miller. And check out the website where you can find Chief Miller Apparel at chiefmillerapparel.com.
I'd like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and associations that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters training for their team members. The Anderson County Fire Department in Anderson, South Carolina. The University Heights Fire Department in University Heights, Ohio. The International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officers Section Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida. The Rogue Interagency Training Association in Medford, Oregon. the Shoreline Fire Department in Shoreline, Washington.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen him before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they're responding to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that he just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. So I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
And if you're interested in attending one of our upcoming programs, here's where we're going to be next. Currently, and through December 11th, we'll be at the Syncrude Oil Refinery in Fort McMurray, Alberta. January 3rd through 9, we will also be back at the Syncrude Oil Refinery here in Fort McMurray. January 12th, we'll be at the Quad County Fire Chiefs Association in Lewiston, Idaho. January 15 to 16, the Pearland Fire Department in Pearland, Texas. January 26th, the Toledo, Ohio Fire Department. February 2 and 3, the Missouri Winter Fire School in Columbia, Missouri. February 22nd, the West Virginia Emergency Services Conference in Pipestem, West Virginia. March 4 through 8, we're going to do a North Shore tour across the north half of Minnesota. The exact towns have not yet been set. March 12th, the Maryland Fire Rescue Institute National Fire Service Staff and Command Program in Towson, Maryland. March 25 through April 3, the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Oahu, Hawaii. To see the locations of all the upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop events, just head over to the samatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SA Matters homepage, and I will give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Check the show notes for how to get connected with us through our newsletter membership, podcast subscribers, YouTube subscribers, and how to follow us on social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 240 of the SA Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Jason Corthell, for sharing your story and your lessons learned that will help to keep all of us safer. Thank you to our awesome sponsors, Midwest Fire and Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, and organizations that have hosted Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted live, virtual, internet-based training events. Thank you to the more than 2,500 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. And remember that special enrollment that I talked about on the Academy as I mentioned at the start of the episode, because that expires on November 30th. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.